Hello, I am George Thornton. I'm an advanced Cicerone and a national ranked BJCP judge. And I am making this video to help you understand one of what I would consider one of the coolest and perhaps most important styles of all time, which would be Saison. This video is going to be more geared towards the BJCP / Cicerone study folk. So if you're studying for one of those certification programs, I hope that you would find this taste along useful. I'm going to do my best to stick to the BJCP score sheet and explain some more about like my intensity for each of the characteristics and get into depth about even some of the more technical terms that I might use to describe some of these flavors. So hopefully this would be useful for you. And if you want to see like a style comparison with this and other styles, or this with other Saisons, those are definitely things that I am interested in doing and plan on doing at some point in the future. But if you have anything like that or else in mind that you'd like to see, then definitely leave a comment below and I'll prioritize that over whatever else. Otherwise, I'll just be kind of reviewing what I feel like, which I think will also be cool. So I'm going to do something real quick here. I'm going to pull up my BJCP score sheet. And if you're studying for BJCP or for Cicerone, I would highly recommend that you do the same. So I'm just doing a little search for that. I'm going to get it from the BJCP program here. And I'm going to use this as my sort of rubric, or my, what they would say in the wine world, my grid. The thing that tells me exactly what I should talk about and when. So if you have that sheet in front of you, you'll notice that it says aroma, appearance, flavor, mouthfeel, overall impression. And you'll notice that we start with aroma first. That's because certain aromas are very, very delicate and they might sort of go away with time. So we're trying to assess aroma first. And then you'll notice just under aroma for each one, we have these subheadings: comment on malt, hops, esters, and other. That means that I need to comment on each one of those things, even if my perception is none. That's always a valuable observation. So there's no such thing as a bad observation. And I'll use that as my cheat sheet, or as like my rubric or my grid to help me make sure that I'm assessing each part of this beer. And you'll notice that the overall impression is the last thing that we talk about. I think that often when people are studying to either do like a blind tasting for an exam, or if they're going into judging, they tend to lead with their overall impression. And what I mean by that is they tend to lead with, pouring the beer into the glass and going like, oh, that's a Saison. I mean, that's the last thing that you would talk about on a score sheet, is whether or not you think this is a very drinkable Saison, etc. The first thing you should do is just ask yourself, what's the aroma? And just describe first. So the way I describe that kind of act of pouring and just kind of doing like a quick overall impression first is, I think of it as like leading the witness. So if you have someone on trial or someone on the witness stand and you're insisting that they give you the information that you want, you'll do whatever you can to push them to tell you that, instead of just tell you the truth. And what you're supposed to do as a judge is first just assess what is the truth about this beer, as in tell me about the aroma, and with the aroma tell me about the hops, the esters, the malt, and other, right? So hopefully that helps, and with all of these together we can kind of get that together or make more sense of it. So this is category 25B from the 2015. I know we have an updated one, but I just kind of did a quick search there. But and then I'll pop this open. Saison Dupont, the kind of quintessential Saison. It's like the Saison that everyone who's making a Saison is trying to make. Of course, there's other amazing Saisons out there. That's why I would really love to do a side-by-side, which I will do one of these days. But yes, as I'm pouring, you should know that I've been planning beercations. That means experiences where I take care of all the programming and planning and as far as hotels and travel, etc. and then we join each other in a very small group, maximum of 6 people, and we go nerd out at some of the coolest breweries in the world. So georgesgeorge.com if you want to learn more about that. So as we pour it, let's notice how that was a nice thick head that poured on that little off-white, but I need to get to aroma. I love Saison Dupont. Okay, so I'll just go in the order of the sheet. So comment on malt. Okay, graham cracker, like pastry dough crust, and I smell some honey, and I smell some, like, if you've ever been to a wheat field and you've just walked by or like kind of run your hand through there, it smells like wheat or like barley, so fresh cereal grains, or I guess growing cereal grains, you could say. And dinner roll. And now we need to put an intensity. So for all of those things, so I described all these malt characteristics, and now we need an intensity. So when I think of all the beers I've ever consumed, the aroma of this malt, from low to high, I would call this low, or like medium minus if I wanted to have a little bit of wiggle room. I use that pretty often, maybe too much, but I still use it and it works. Okay, and then I need to comment on hops. So I smell chamomile, and I smell fresh cut hay, and I smell fresh cut lawn, and I smell a little touch of like really dry, like woody, like really dry floor, like earth. So earthy is the word I'm looking for. Even like chaparral. So like, I'm from San Diego, so when I go on a hike in San Diego, it's this desert-like, sagebrush sort of landscape, and it reminds me of that. So really dusty, that's that kind of chaparral. And then for esters, now this is where this beer has a lot to say. Orange, like marmalade, and like a mandarin, a little touch of like lemon zest, finger lime. I smell a little pear, apricot, peach, little touch of pineapple. But my overall hops intensity, I have to go back, very low. My overall ester intensity, or yeast characteristic, is medium plus. And then I get some black pepper, some white pepper, pink peppercorn, and a little bit of these other like phenolic compounds. So esters would be fruity, phenols would be more spicy, and these other phenolic compounds be almost like a very low clove. All right. So, and then do I smell coffee or I don't know, mint or something? I do smell some minty herbaceousness, but I think that's more of a hop characteristic that I can add onto my note. But I don't smell I don't really smell other in terms of like other things that they may have added to it. So in terms of chocolate or coffee or something like that. Okay, so I could write other no, or like perceived no, right? Because I don't know if they put stuff in here, but my perception is no. Okay, and then next on the BJCP, we have appearance. So I'm going to comment on color, clarity, head, and for head, I want to comment on retention, color, and texture. So color, I'm going to call this, your vision of it's going to be a little different than what I see in my glass. So that's about what it kind of looks like in my glass, but yellow or gold, and the clarity is very low, and the head is like bone white with very good retention. So it's drops. I might write poured a thick 3-finger foam with very tight bubbles, very few medium-sized fisheye. Those little bubbles in there are called fisheye when you see something a little bigger like that, and very good retention. All right, flavor. Okay. So for flavor, I get a lot. So I'm going to use this sheet to keep me kind of organized. So I'm going to comment on malt. Malt intensity overall, I'd say is low, and I would describe it as honey, dinner roll, biscuit, and like muesli, or almost like frosted flakes as well, or like grits, like oat grits, and then, or oatmeal even. Grainy, could be a description for that. And then for the hops, my bitterness is medium, but my bitterness from hop-derived bitterness, I would probably say is medium, but I'm also getting a bit of phenolic bitterness. So I'll talk about that because right now we're talking about hops. So my bitterness, hop-derived bitterness, I'm going to call medium. And then my hop-derived flavor, I'm going to say grassy, herbal, earthy, woody. And if I want to go further into that, I can talk about that chaparral, those sort of things. But on this score sheet, we're going to run out of space. And then fermentation characteristics, loads. So in terms of intensity of fermentation characteristics, I would call this medium or medium plus. I think that's a good range. I think if someone went high, I wouldn't disagree with them. But for me, in the range of all fermentation characteristics that I've had from beer, I would still put this in like the medium plus. And then I would describe it as bergamot, orange peel, mandarin, orange, coriander, cardamom, and clove, and then white pepper, black pepper, pink peppercorn again, and like fresh tarragon, like freshly picked tarragon, or even like basil. Little hint of anise, and nice, yeah, and like dried orange peel, that kind of thing. And then for my balance, this is where we look at our intensities and the fact that we matched or called out intensities for everything. So I think I said for malt intensity, I put low. For hop intensity, and in terms of flavor, I said like in that medium to medium plus territory. For yeast, I said medium plus to high territory. So when I look at those intensities that I called for each thing, the thing that I was like leaning towards the highest, or that I described kind of in terms of intensity, that should typically dictate what the balance is, or how I would describe the balance. So I would say fermentation characteristic forward, or like yeast character forward beer, with supporting hop bitterness and like malt flavor, right? The finish / aftertaste is a lingering bitterness, and it's a lingering sort of phenolic bitterness. I'm getting more of that like white pepper and that black pepper in the finish. So that's coming from yeast characteristics, or the fermentation profile. So this lingering yeasty, dry sort of sensation in the finish. And then other, I don't really have much to comment on because I don't know if they haven't told me that there's something else in here for me to comment on. And it's not obvious to me what it is, so I can't really guess what it is. And then mouthfeel, body, carbonation, warmth, creaminess, astringency. So body, light body, carbonation. This is where I do the test of, I swish it in my mouth and I kind of see like how much of the liquid turns to bubbles, how long does it then take for the bubble to turn back into liquid, and or how much does it sort of puff up my cheeks as I do this swish. So I'll take a normal size swig, and I could feel the gas almost like pushing, almost like to the point of like my lips might like open and I'll spit all over the place, right? So I feel a little bit of, a good amount, I should say, of this like swelling from the carbonation. So that's telling me high carbonation. Light body. Warmth is low but pleasant, and so that's alcohol warmth. So I can kind of feel a little heat coming off the tongue. And then creaminess is low. And astringency. So this one's really interesting because astringency here, to me, is medium. And the astringency is coming from hop-derived bitterness and phenolic bitterness, but its perception is being increased by the fact that this beer is finishing so dry. If this beer didn't finish so dry, my perception of the astringency would be different. I would perceive this beer as being less astringent if it had more sweetness. So since that sweetness isn't there, aka this beer is finishing very dry or highly attenuated, that's telling me that it's going to increase my perception. So I'm going to write that my perceived astringency is medium or even like medium plus. And I might put a comment in there, enhanced by the dry finish as typical for the style, right? Because I know I'm drinking a Saison. Someone entered this in the Saison category, so I'm judging it as a Saison, and I get a very dry finish, and I get this medium plus astringency. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with that astringency, but it's nice to comment on that and give yourself a little bit more depth and give the brewer a little bit more information too about how and why you're perceiving these things, so that it's clear what you mean by that. All right, and then I go to my overall impression. So comment on overall drinking pleasure associated with entry and give suggestions for improvement. So for the overall impression, I always just write like my menu board description or like my elevator pitch. So, you know, that would be like in this moment when I'm writing this out, I still haven't assigned a score yet to anything. I want to make that clear. I haven't assigned a score to anything in my mind. My job so far has only been to perceive and describe. So perceive as well as I can. So I practice on my perceptive ability by tasting fruits and smelling fruits, etc. So I know kind of what those things actually taste like and smell like. And then my descriptive ability. So I try to constantly practice on how well I can describe these things, right? So far I've just been perceiving and describing. No score. But in this moment, this is the beginning of me starting to help myself create a good score. So what's that look like? What's that mean? So I start with thinking like, okay, if I had this beer in front of me and I'm drinking it, and my friend comes up to me and they want to know like, what's that beer like? Like they might want to drink it or they might want to order it themselves, right? And I want to give them a nice, easy description of what this beer is so that they can make up their own mind and decide, right? So I'm going to say, it's a pale ale with pretty high bitterness and lots of yeast character that's both fruity and peppery. I can end right there, right? So it's a pale beer that's got a lot of yeast, fruity, and spicy, right? Something like that, nice and easy. It describes what this beer is. It describes for me like what I'm experiencing with this beer. I might add, you know, highly carbonated, really dry finishing, something like that. But I want to keep it really easy, okay? And the reason why I need to write this for me, when I'm doing my judging and I'm doing like my overall impression, is I'm trying to get myself to be really honest with myself and with whoever's going to read my notes. Like, what experience did I have? I just described all these things, but like, what's the like 1 or 2 sentence description of like what I just went through or how I'm experiencing this beer, right? Because then I will go to my beer judge certification, my BJCP notes, and I'll read the overall impression real quick. Most commonly a pale, refreshing, highly attenuated, moderately bitter, moderate strength Belgian ale with a very dry finish. That already just sounds like what I just said about this beer, right? Remember my buddy came up to me and they asked me, what is that beer like? I basically like described it as part of the overall impression, but let me keep going. Typically highly carbonated, yep, and using non-barley cereal grains and optional spices for complexity. Okay, I don't know. I don't have the recipe in front of me, so I can't assume. As complements the expressive yeast character that is fruity, spicy, and not overly phenolic. So if I read that overall impression from the BJCP, and it sounds quite like the overall impression that I wrote for myself to keep myself honest, now I need to go to my score sheet and go to the very bottom of the score sheet. There's a scoring guide and it says outstanding, excellent, very good, good, fair, problematic. So if I go to outstanding, the points for that range are 45 to 50. and it says world-class example of style. If I go to excellent, it says 38 to 44 points, exemplifies style well, requires minor fine-tuning. 30 to 37 would be generally within style parameters, some minor flaws. So it might actually have something wrong with it also, and it might be a little outside of the style and/or, right? 21 to 29, misses the mark on style and/or minor flaws. So what would be missing the mark on Saison? It would be really sweet, flat. It would have no yeast character. That would be missing the mark on the style. One of those things being off, one or two of those things being off, right? That's not what I described here, right? This was highly carbonated, dry, etc. Then fair is 14 to 20, off flavors / aromas or major style deficiencies, unpleasant. So it was like hard to drink for the style. Quick comment, if you don't like Saison, no one gives a shit that you don't like Saison. Your job as judge is to pretend, you go drink the best versions of Saison, and then you pretend that you love that. That's your job, right? And then, so it wouldn't be your job, or the brewer doesn't care that you don't like Saison. They want you to be a judge, which means you have to be fair and unbiased, right? And then problematic would be like way wrong, but typically I would never score a beer that low. I would just give them the points to make them feel good, and then give them a lot of feedback to help them improve. The points for me are really to help like the brewer know about where they are, and the rest of the competition to know about where they are, and the judge in front of me, who I'm a partner with, to know where I'm at with this beer. But I would never use points to hurt the feelings of a brewer or to like punish a brewer. Because I could score this beer higher and refuse that the beer moves on to the next round. I could do both of those things. So I could use the score to sort of encourage the brewer and say like, hey, this, but okay. Let me pull back to how I would rank this. So I wrote my overall impression, and I have my scoring guide. And in this case, like, I know I'm drinking Saison Dupont from the suggested examples list, like from the commercial examples, right? I know I'm drinking a world-class example according to BJCP. So this is good practice for you, knowing that regardless of whether or not you like this beer is a 45. Maybe it's a 40, like maybe you get one that's really old, or it's been beat up, it's been in the sun a whole lot, whatever, that sort of stuff, right? So maybe there's some kind of minor flaws, or it's showing some age. This happens to be a beer that ages pretty well, but you get my point. So you need to score this beer in the excellent to outstanding range, just based on kind of what the style guidelines are trying to do, which is helping people from all over the world kind of understand what a style tends to be like, which this beer tends to represent that style, and helping adjust your palate and your understanding and your thoughts around what this style or what this beer should be, right? That's fair, right? So once I know what score I'm going to use, so to get back to sort of like how I fill out my score sheets, to recap a little bit, like I went through and I just focused on perception. I made sure I hit everything. I put intensities on everything, and then I tried to describe in detail. So I didn't just say citrusy. I tried to say, lemon peel or whatever. I tried to add some detail. So I'm filling out the score sheet as much as possible. And then I wrote my overall impression, and that was my elevator pitch to my friend. And then I looked at my scoring guide to figure out how I should score this. So I'm looking at it and go, okay, 45, I probably want to hit like 44 or 45-ish for my points. So then I go through and I start assigning everything here. And then I try to make sure that my total score equals 44 or 45, or about what I was looking for. And then once I've done that, then I'll go through and try to fill out every line of that overall impression form or section. And there I would say like, fantastic beer, I loved it, I would drink this every day or whatever. I would try to like add a compliment or word of encouragement. So if the beer was a terrible beer, I would describe it honestly. So like if this was a flat, hoppy, no yeast character beer, I would just write that out because that's the description I'm giving to my friend. And then I would say, hey, I don't mind these descriptions, but this just isn't the style. You know, the style needs to use this like really expressive yeast. It should have some phenolic astringency to it, or estery sort of profile to it. It should finish really dry. And I would just give them the suggestions that, like, where your beer doesn't connect with the beer that I was expecting when I sat down to judge this category. If I detect like major off flavors, like that are like diacetyl or acetaldehyde or oxidation, anything like that, or even like if the carbonation was too low, I would then try to make suggestions to help improve that. So I'd have to be specific to what might have caused that. And I also have to make sure that I don't pretend like I know the recipe. I wasn't there to make the recipe. I wasn't there on brew day. I wasn't there on packaging day. So I'm just making assumptions about what I think could have caused these things, and I'm trying to give a few options. So if it's like diacetyl, it might be like, this might be caused by rushing the fermentation or packaging too soon. It could, you might want to review your sanitation practices, that sort of stuff. And I just try to give, like, in general, I'm almost trying to give them like, what's the Google search that they should do after this? So if it was a terrible beer and I need to help them improve, I'd be like, look into sanitation procedures and like diacetyl rests. That might be just like the Google search they do that's like diacetyl rests pale ale or whatever. And that might be the thing that like leads them to the article or the information that they need to improve. That's my goal, is to help every single person who's reading my score sheet make better beer in the future, because I want to drink more good beer, right? It's very selfish and self-serving, right? And that's it. So then from there, it's just kind of making the math work. You have to, like, aromas 12 points. So I just do a quick, like, okay, what's like a 95% of 12, or like what's an A plus look like out of 12, so I kind of have to just do a little quick thinking. Appearance almost always gets 3, etc. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's Saison Dupont, one of my favorite beers, one of my favorite styles of beers. It goes well with everything. If you're writing or practicing for BJCP, or mostly, more so for Cicerone, Saison can be kind of a cheater beer in terms of like what to pair with, because it does tend to go with a lot of things. It's not a cheater beer though if you think about and describe really well every element of the beer and how it matches with every element of the dish. So if you're going to use Saison Dupont, you can't just be like, oh, I would pair this with Saison Dupont because it goes with everything. No, you got to describe how the dryness and the carbonation interacts with that part of the food, etc. So that would be where you practice that, and maybe I can do a separate video on that. So that was your more in-depth BJCP sort of walkthrough on just this one beer from this one category. If there's a certain category or beer or a comparison of beers that you would like to watch me do, so that you can go along with them and study on your own / with me, then let me know in the comments below. If you want to go on a beercation with me and nerd out about all of this stuff, then go to georgesgeorge.com or message me or whatever, and I'll get those dates to you, and you can kind of learn what's included and what's with that. But that's that. Thanks. Have a fantastic day.